Hello, and welcome to Metachemistry. This is episode 138, and we're here to talk about something that doesn't really come up all that often, I feel like, in Infinity, and that is narrative play. And so we have a special guest with us today, Kyle, aka Toasty. Thank you so much for coming on to join us. We really appreciate you coming on to talk about campaign play.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
But yeah, so narrative play. So we're going to take some time to talk about what is narrative play, how you can use it, why you might want to use it, and talk about a system that Toasty has developed to kind of help assist in that kind of play. But before we get into that, we'd like to take a moment to thank Mo Games, the sponsor of Metachemistry. Mythic's Online Emporium is an online supplier of Infinity that you can find over at mo-games.com. And as part of their sponsorship of our show, all of our paid level patrons get a 10% discount code to their store. And whether you're a patron or not, you are entered in every month just by joining our Discord for a $40 coupon code raffle. So you just join our Discord, you hit the Mo Games entry roll, and as long as you have a US address for Mo to ship to, you'll be entered to win that each and every month. Because what's better than games? Mo Games. So, again, tonight we have Toasty, Ian, and myself. So, Toasty, tell us a little bit about your journey in Infinity or wargaming in general and kind of what brought you to this place where you are trying to, why you're building this narrative tool.
Yeah, so I think like a lot of us, we started with a different war game and kind of ended up here. Um, I started dabbling with Infinity in like 2016, and I only got through a handful of games before kind of bouncing off of it and taking a break for a while. Uh, and then I
Hmm.
got back into Infinity in January of 2020.
Right?
Which was an interesting time. So I got like 2 in-person games in before the big thing happened.
Hmm.
But the best part about the pandemic was that I weaseled my roommate into playing Infinity with me. So during COVID, I was playing like 1 or 2 games of Infinity a day, and I gotta say, it wasn't that bad.
Nice.
So played a lot of Infinity around then and, playing a lot ever since.
Nice. Very cool. And I mean, as it usually goes for anyone who's been in the game for any span of time, it's probably multiple is the answer, but what factions do you like to play?
I started with Nomads. They've all I started with Corregidor. They were the one that drew my eye the most. But recently, it's been Ariadna after the last October update. I feel like
Sure.
Ariadna's been very fun.
They're very solid now.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of cool tools for sure. Yeah, and I know it's probably come up a couple times, but yeah, for me, like one of the biggest things, like for TAC and by extension vanilla Ariadna, it's actually having to worry about what's under a camo marker because usually my default response is to face check camo markers and keep running past them until they do something.
Yeah.
That's a lot
The
scarier when there's a BS 12 or 13 special die autocannon and things
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
It's nice they gave us something with some real teeth behind it that you can't just ignore. It made
Yeah,
their camo
exactly.
game a lot more diverse, which is such a strength of Ariadna that it's fun to lean
For
into.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, for people that may not be familiar or maybe not familiar in the context of Infinity, Toasty, do you want to talk a little bit about what it is that you consider narrative play? Like if somebody says like, "Oh, I'd really love to play a narrative game." What does that mean? What are they in for?
I think it depends. I think there's kind of 2 types. There's narrative and there's campaign, and can kind of intertwine those 2 as much as you want. Um, for my purposes, a campaign is kind of it's the architecture that links together multiple games, right? Like what happens to the troops that die? What happens to the troops that live? Do they get better? That kind of stuff. Whereas narrative
Mhm.
is is the set dressing, right? Like who's the bad guy? Why are we doing this? Who's killing who? Is who's Aleph mad at, right? So you have narrative and you have campaign, and I think the best thing is when you can combine both of them, but that's also the most challenging.
For sure. Yeah, but it's something that I think is really rewarding when you get them both together. And I agree, it is very hard to kind of do both at the same time in some capacity. And I think that in order to do both well, I think you kind of need someone who is like you need some sort of game master or someone who is running things to kind of keep things coherent. I think it's much easier to get half of that, but to have both, you kind of need some arbitrator to weave everything together.
Yeah, and we already have some great narrative systems from uh, Warsenal, Manhunt, if you looked at that. And
Hmm.
last year, Dogfinity did some narrative stuff by James Pittman. That was great. And Chad and James and the rest of the Adepticon team have also been doing some narrative stuff. And I've been reading all their stuff and talking to them, and all of that stuff is great. So, all worth a look at as well.
Yeah, for sure. I was hanging out with like Chad and James at Gen Con this past year. I didn't get a chance to jump in on the narrative event, but uh, talking to Chad about it sounds like it's always a good time. He
Yeah,
loves to go wild with it.
Chad was absolutely he's like my workhorse inspiration, right? When I grow up, I want to be Chad.
Right, right.
He knows how to have a fun time and not to get too serious about it. And I think for events of that scale, that's kind of what you need, right?
For sure. Yeah, and so I think that's a good distinction that you have those kind of two components that both can exist independently or together in terms of a campaign structure where your games are linked mechanically, and you have a narrative structure which kind of forms the why things are happening and is influenced by the actions in the game. So, why might someone want to do this? We're all just playing ITS anyway. Why don't we just keep doing that?
Well, let me tell you why I made this campaign system. So it was late N4, and it feels like late N4 went on forever, right? Steel Phalanx was OP, Combined Army was OP, and like nothing was shifting the meta anymore. And I mean, I'm a workhorse, and people felt like they had solved Infinity to, as much as I hate that, but you know,
Mhm.
Sure.
it was feeling stale. So I was trying to come up with something like, how can I get people to care about their models? How can I get people to show up? How can I give them an experience that's really different from ITS play? So I did a lot of different things, but I ended up with some sort of, campaign. Obviously very inspired by XCOM, right? The gameplay is XCOM. What about the base
Right.
building side, right? What about the more individual trooper um, management kind of stuff? Because there's definitely some dopamine to be mined there as well. Um,
Definitely.
so I started with that kind of stuff and developed on it for a while. Um, what I found was players don't respond to the nitty gritty, like, because Infinity is such a complicated game already.
Mhm.
There's already so much in your mind. So one of my goals for this was I don't want to really change the game that's happening on the table that much, if at all. And I want people to be able to play through my campaign with an army list that they can load up in army. So
Hmm.
what that what that quickly meant is I didn't want to do like, all right, you got Fusilier Jim, he's got an extra ballistic skill. You got Fusilier Steve, he's got an extra willpower. You've got that's too much minutia for this game when you're talking 10 troopers, like tracking all of that stuff. So that went out of the window pretty quick.
Hmm.
So, but how do we capture growth in our forces, right? Because that's a key part of a campaign. So I was kind of inspired by Infinity's own order pool system and made something called experience. It's just a stat. If your trooper survives the mission, they generate some experience, and then you can spend that experience like it was points to upgrade a troop to a better troop. So instead of Fusilier Jim getting an extra ballistic skill, the Fusilier becomes a bolt, right? And yeah, you can think of it. It's the same, Fusilier Jim became Bolt Jim, but it's a lot easier on the table for everybody because we all know what a bolt is, right? But we don't know, you know, hard to keep track of
Yeah,
+1 ballistic skill.
for sure. Yeah, especially if, like you said, you're playing with a normal army list or even, a smaller army list in some cases, that can still be tricky when you can't just have a single point of reference for what your trooper is and has.
Yeah. And then another goal of mine was just to get people playing with profiles they that don't see the table, right? Like I'm sure we all have miniatures that we've spent hours painting and may have never seen the table. So I wanted to try and get more of those minis on the table as well.
For sure, yeah. And what does that look like for your system? Like, how are you incorporating these kind of less desirable units or profiles?
Yeah. So first, I made this campaign, like I said, in N4, and the main mode was me playing it like a DM with my players, and I'm not playing to win, right? I'm playing to give them an experience. I'm the DM,
Hmm.
so when I'm moving my units around, I'm not doing the most optimal thing. I'm maybe doing the more narrative and interesting and crazy thing, right? To have fun. So that was kind of one change. But then
Hmm.
the other way you can incentivize fun units is very specific scenarios. Like I think Frostbite and like Biotech 4 and what's the hacking? Mind Wipe, right? These are great
Mhm.
missions that
Yeah,
really incentivize very specific kinds of units that you might not bring otherwise. Like my favorite unit in Biotech 4 is a hidden deployment sniper, right? Because you reveal
sure.
it on their last order and you don't have to get it out of your deployment zone. So I really like that kind of design and how like Frostbite, right? Now you have to bring all these remotes and heavy infantry and you start considering things that you maybe haven't before. So that was kind of I tried to design missions like that.
Gotcha. Very cool. And it sounds like you have run some of these before, of course. What were some of your experiences like? Like, what stood out to you as far as things that worked very well, like things you'd recommend to someone else who's trying to run such a game, or and maybe some pitfalls that you would advise people to try and avoid?
My best advice is to keep it simple. Like I said, Infinity is a complicated game, and I've had so many cool ideas for so many like systems and oh yeah, if you get victory points, you can spend them on cards, and this card will give all of your bikers extra dodge, or it'll give you a speedball at the start of the game. The more you start adding, the more you start forgetting, and it Infinity is already so good on the table. We don't really need to spice that side up very much.
Yeah, yeah. So there's an old game called Confrontation from a French company called Rackham. They've gone away. It's fantasy game, skirmish styles, really cool. But they had a campaign system called Dogs of War, and it's exactly what you're talking about being overcomplicated because you had to keep track as the game was going on of everything that your guys were doing. So it's like my guy has a bow and he shot somebody. I have to mark him down for 2 experience points because you would
Yeah,
forget, and it was that granular, and it was a really cool system. But it was so much bookkeeping that it was difficult to get a campaign going for more than a session or two before people were just like, "No, I'm good."
yeah, and I definitely felt that with some of my players because, like I said, I was running this campaign pen and paper before I ever decided to make an app for it, and I had a couple. I've probably maybe played 20 sessions of the campaign. Everybody did missions 1 and 2, but only 2 people actually finished every mission and got all the way to the end.
Mhm.
Um, and the nitty gritty is what prevents people from digging their teeth into the system, right? Like there is a lot of fun tinkering with our lists, right? Like, oh, I'm playing Mind Wipe, so I want to bring this hacker, and I need someone to go kill this console, right? And I love sitting down and really visualizing a plan, right? Mind Wipe's just a great example because you have those two consoles, right? And when you activate one, you know
Hmm.
the enemy has to go for the other. So, like, okay, I have a plan for the guy to go here. Then I have a plan to defend that console. Then I have a plan to attack your server. And I have a plan to defend my server. And I think all of that leads to building very intentional lists. And I think that's what I love about Infinity is planning ahead like that, and especially when you can throw in a weird unit, right? Like Raoul Spectre, my favorite mind wipe unit, drops in, blows up a server, kills everybody, but and he's not a unit you see all the time. So that again, that was a great way to do it.
Yeah, Raul was a beast, especially after said October update. Like, he was
You get
already
a
good, but he got way better.
special
Well,
dice drop bear, right? That's what he got.
yeah, special die drop bear. He went to full 2 vitality from 1 and no wounding
Right.
cap without shock immune, and went from martial arts 2 to 3.
It's good martial arts.
Yeah, so he's a terror.
He should be. He's Moon Knight.
Yeah. Legally distinct Moon Knight.
Yes.
So when I was running people through these campaigns, like I said, some of the extra difficulty in bookkeeping was kind of preventing them from chewing on the systems, right?
Mhm.
We had the experience stat, and it wasn't too hard to calculate, right? Because every trooper just has a stat. It's 0 to 10. At the end of the mission, if they're alive, boom, that's how much experience you get. So you just tally everybody up, you get that much experience. It was pretty easy to do in a spreadsheet, but it was still, spreadsheeting. And then when I would
Mhm.
tell people, okay, I had to make these promotion trees, right? So like a Gulam can't just become a tag, right? A Gulam
Mhm.
can become a Moyib or a I can't remember at the top of my head, but I went through every faction. I've read every single page on humansphere.com to
Mhm.
read the lore about all these units to kind of incorporate that, right? And see what makes sense, like what units recruit from what units, like know a lot of that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
so I was reading all of those things to figure out like what would it make sense for a promotion tree to look like, and would build all of that out. So the experience system I think is really what's at the core of the campaign, right? So like I said, generates experience, you spend that to get better units, but the real attrition, right? Like if you're doing poorly in this campaign, right? How does that play out? Because I think a lot of the pitfalls of campaign systems are like you do mission one, it goes poorly. Now you're disadvantaged for mission two, and you're just not interested in playing it, right?
Oh yeah.
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 I
So,
Anti-snowball mechanics.
mhm,
well, we had a Necromunda campaign way back where one guy had to restart his gang 6 times because he kept losing that hard every time, and then it ended up just being like me and one other player in the top positions just fighting each other because we snowballed across everybody else, and there wasn't a good mechanic to balance it.
yeah, snowballing is definitely it's such a hard thing because we want to reward the people who do better and maybe punish the people who do worse, but just making the game unfair, especially in a game like Infinity that's so tight, is
Mhm.
very, it's challenging. So the
Yeah.
system I have for that is very simple. It's just recruits, right? So at the start of the campaign, you get one recruit for every availability of each unit. So like in US Ariadna, right? Your desperados are availability 6. That means you can hire 6 desperados over the course of the campaign. If you bring 6 desperados in mission 1 and they all die, you can't bring another desperado for the rest of the campaign.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So what that rewards is players who are getting wrecked and doing poorly. They still get points, a good amount of points, but they're very limited in their choices. They might have to start using those profiles they don't normally use.
I like that a
Yeah, for
lot.
sure. Yeah, and I think that having some way to prevent snowballing or some like catch-up mechanic or what have you is really important because I feel like that has been for other Infinity narrative or campaign systems, that's kind of been a weak point, both in Campaign Paradiso and in Daedalus Falls. where they have these frameworks that are interesting, but it only rewards the victor notably. And then the loser is, like you said, disadvantaged going into further rounds, and then it's easier to get further and further behind. So, as far as like needing to delve into different units and whatnot, uh, that I think is a really fun narrative aspect. It's like, hey, you're playing this sectorial, this is what they have access to. Um, but if you are playing and someone, uh, how do you determine which player is at a deficit? Is this by a difference in experience totals or some other measurement? And if so, how do those sort of meet in the middle somewhat?
Yeah, well, so this campaign system has a couple modes of play, right? Like I said, this started as me just playing it like a DM, running people through a very specific mission set. So that's what I call like a narrative or a custom campaign. So then there's like a open-ended custom campaign, which just like how much money do you get, and then it lets you use the framework to carry on between mission endlessly until you decide, okay, I'm done. Right. My custom campaign actually has all of these assets you click through where it's like, welcome to the briefing room, Commander. Here's your mission, and like overhead maps, like you're going into the zone. Here's the enemy. A lot of pre-game choices, right? Like I said.
Yeah, very
Um,
cool.
but the third mode is a versus mode, and that's kind of my more like ITS competitor. I don't know, a little more competitive, where two players who are both using the system fight each other, and you know it's tracked over a series of missions. So to answer how do we keep people from falling behind too hard, in my narrative campaign there are every mission is basically did you succeed or did you fail, right? And if the player fails, they actually just go to a makeup mission. It's like a side mission. So the lore is kind of like the commander's pissed at you, right? Like you did such a bad job. We're gonna send you to go do this job no one wants to do. You're protecting a you have to go do a shady back alley deal to go buy the intel and hopefully nothing goes wrong. You have to go protect this CEO's kid and hopefully nothing goes wrong to get us the funding we need to keep going. So
Nice.
there's little side missions that you can do, and those are life or death missions, right? If you lose a main mission, you go to the side one. If you lose that, you're out of the campaign. But at that point, you've already played 3 missions, so you're not completely out of it. You didn't have a bad time, I guess.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's pretty fun. And now, are those going to be against another player, or is that going to be is that designed to be against a
A
or
DM.
with? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's what I said. Like the campaign modes, they're either a specific campaign that I've written one out and coded it into the app. Um, the app also can handle like if you have this app, you can make a campaign. You just need to create some assets and upload them onto Imager, right? But then you can create whatever you want and then give it to a player, and they'll be able to get the briefings, read it, plan it, that kind of stuff. So um, I don't want to spoil it too much because I plan on doing some fun stuff, maybe doing playthroughs with some fun Infinity players. But the first mission is called the Dig, and you're on a planet, you're on Ariadna, you're on Dawn, and there's a relic that's been dug up, and you have to kind of go find out what it is. So it's an 8x4 table, and you start all the way on one side. The enemy is in this base all the way on the far side. So you get to sneak in and infiltrate, and you just have to find out what that relic is and escape. So players can start thinking like, okay, maybe I want to just use a lot of infiltration to get all the way across the table. Maybe I'll bring a fire team and be really strong, or maybe I'll drop in a Fide and sneak in the base and have him do it. And it's been really fun seeing all the different players find their own way in. I mean, I'm sure all DMs know the moment where you calculate all these different solutions and then players just, you know, bust down the wall in some way you never expected, or they do it the hard way and somehow manage to make it work.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I think
totally.
that was when I knew that this was working, is when everybody was doing something completely different and they were all having a good time and they were all making it work.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And now you've referenced your campaign a couple times now, and so I think that this might be a good time to talk about the app that you have that you're working on. Um, so this is called Infinity the Campaign, right?
Yeah. So
And so tell me a little bit about one. We'll have the link in the description for folks to go check this out. But do you want to walk through a little bit of what that looks like and what tools are available to facilitate this kind of play?
yeah, so it's this is just the structure to kind of run you between missions, and it can either be played in versus mode with two people system, or with a DM kind of guiding someone through a very, crafted set of missions. So that's kind of more narrative, right? If you want to be the bad guy, the enemy, and have guide a player through a series of missions, that's what I would call a campaign mode, or generic custom. And then versus campaign, that's going to be more of like, let's have a 3 round tournament. We're going to do it in this versus mode and play through that. So if you go to the app, you'll have just create a new campaign. It'll show you those three different generic custom versus campaigns, and you kind of start clicking there. So every faction has its own like little rules or two as well that it'll show you before you click into it. Like Pan-Oceania gets 5% more money because they're the best, right? Those were kind of fun to make, but I tried to make them
Yeah.
very pretty simple and not interact with the gameplay too much.
And just out of curiosity, is that by overall faction or did you go as granular as sectorial?
Yeah, so I tried to have one overall rule for an entire faction, and then about one rule for a specific sectoral. So all Pano flavors get um, a little bit of extra money, but Kestrel, for example, gets 3 speedballs instead of 2. And trying to create these fun little rules, read the lore, do what you can, but I tried to just not invent anything, right? Like why
Mhm.
you don't need to reinvent the wheel when speedball already exists. When I tell you you get 3 speedballs instead of 2, it's like understood, right? Not much
Sure. Yeah.
complexity there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, like you mentioned earlier, like Infinity is already a fairly dense game mechanically. And so just kind of tweaking the existing levers is a lot easier. Both one from a balance perspective, 'cause, I'd like to be like in the ballpark at least. I think it is a little bit less relevant when you're trying to tell a story, but it's still you don't want there to be like wild disparity. But also less just cognitive load trying to come up with all of these things.
Yeah, and making it easier on the player too.
For sure.
So I think I've explained the three modes appropriately, right? There's custom campaign, right? I've made a mission called or the Xenotech relic, right? And it's all about that one relic on the first mission, right? You got to find it. Things happen with it. Things escalate, and that's really the true. That was what I came here to make, right? Everything else was expansion on top of that. But then there's kind of an endless campaign mode that doesn't have any specific references, right? Because my custom campaign is like there's a mercenary company called Argent. They're doing bad things, and you're on this planet, right? Then there's a generic campaign. If you want to just kind of show up with your player knowing nothing and you want to DM a session, you can use this app as your way to carry your group of soldiers from mission to mission, but give them the lore at the table. And then versus mode is if people want to just play a series of games together and have it be more competitive, but also tracked.
Sure. So that's where you're just using the campaign framework and aren't really worried about a story around it per se.
Yeah, I think it's up to the person running it, if they wanted to like make some teams, make some narrative around it, it'll work with that. But it's not built in because I wanted it to be open ended.
Yeah, that seems really cool. And I haven't been able to spend very much time with this app. I just saw this. I saw you post it fairly recently, but it looks really cool. Like there's a lot of options in here. I was poking around the DM panel to see, like, oh, there's dozens of different like buffs and triggers and events and things like that, which is fun to see.
Yeah, that's kind of where I actually assigned like the unit or the factional rules to an entire faction and mercenaries and stuff. Like mercenaries are a fun one, right? We're talking about catch-up mechanics. So if you're
Hmm.
running low on recruits, right? You keep going on missions, you keep getting devastated, you can hire mercenaries, but they're going to cost you victory points. So you're still going to have troops still play in the mission, but you're lowering your overall score because you're paying for them with victory points, right? Most commanders wouldn't, why are you hiring all those yan-yans? Like that's not a good look, right? It's bad PR.
Right. I was just talking to some friends earlier today about some. It was a different miniatures game, but same idea in terms of like, well, they're bad people, but they could be worse. I'm like, oh, so they're just like Drews. Since that's
Yay!
their company motto for those of you unfamiliar, which is a great motto for a company to have.
Could be worse.
We're bad people, but we could be worse.
And then there's
Yeah,
Akari, who is the worst.
it was just the
They-
worst.
yeah, that's them. They're the worst.
Well,
We could be
so
Akari.
this is a good question that I had for you guys is
Mm.
I haven't made any rules for any of the mercenaries. So
Ooh.
what we can maybe brainstorm one right here. So like Akari, right? They're terrible people.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So maybe their rules can involve doing war crimes or doing bad things. So how could we incentivize the player to do something in that way, right? Uh, maybe we can reward them for just killing, just killing the enemy, right? You get a little extra reward for killing.
Okay, but do it in a way that incentivizes the war crime aspect of it. And I'm reminded of the old ITS mission rules where if when O12 came out, where if you
Oh
used a
right,
Concilium banned weapon in front of a war core, that
Hmm.
you lost victory points, and then O12 was immune because they used rubber bullets. But
right.
maybe an inverse of that of you get some bonus if you use Concilium banned weaponry, so flamethrowers, nano weapons, EM, shotguns, stuff like that.
Yeah, the one very easy resource I can give out is experience, right? And that represents, just getting more knowledgeable over the battlefield or over their career. So we could reward Akari troops for killing people with continuous damage weapons or any of those banned weapons. I'd have to go look at that
I
list
mean,
again.
basic Druids have viral pistols, so
Yeah. Yeah. Shock weapons, that kind of stuff.
mhm.
That's
Yeah.
not a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any penalties for acting in certain ways in some of these missions, but you could also have them like ignore penalties for behavior that you would normally try and disincentivize other players, but they just
Mhm.
don't care about their reputation. Their reputation is they're just going to do the job regardless.
Yeah.
Yes. Brings me to one of my favorite rules that I came up with, which is for ISS. So we all know and love the Guangxi, and we all know that they
Yes.
we all know where they get those guys from. So
Yep. I
at
love
the
that.
end of your game, if if you've immobilized any enemy troops and you're in base to base contact with them at the end of the game, you get to take them as prisoners. Which means next game you get a free Guangxi for each prisoner you take.
I love it.
Yeah.
I
So
knew
I
that's where
love
that was going.
yeah. But right, it's very easy to explain, right? You just say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can take your guys prisoners, and then I get Guangxi." Like, very simple. But it doesn't change any rules, but it's a great way to link the repercussions of one game into the other, and it's a really fun little thing to do as a player, right? Like, I know a lot of times when I go to a tournament, if I bomb the first round, I'm just like, "All right, I'm not winning this event. Let's just have fun," right? So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to use these special rules as ways to like, hey, go do this. It'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really cool. But yeah, I'd be interested to see like look at more levers that you can pull and like what options are available for things because I think that yeah, the merchant companies are things you could do some pretty interesting stuff with. Like I mean, I'm sad Forco's not around, but I could see
Me
them getting
too.
something like, if you would get points based on completing certain tasks, if you have a war core that has line of sight to that happening, then they get a bonus because they're
Yeah, right.
televising everything they're doing and stuff like that.
They're the only two Warcore faction, right?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
were.
I think they were.
Yeah, no, and that's a great idea. I got a lot of those ideas for special rules from a lot of places, right? I would read
Hmm.
the overview of the faction to maybe kind of find out what they were about. There were a couple like specific units I would read the lore into and find out what they were about, and it was all good ways to get inspired. And sometimes it was just looking at the unit's profile. I'm like, yeah, you know, the narrative, the idea of this unit doesn't really match it on the table. Like, how can I make it how can I make it fit a little bit better?
Yeah, for sure.
I got to learn some fun things like what's the EM mine layer 2 in Hawk Islam?
Shujai.
Yeah, the Shujai. Those
Mhm.
guys are only resurrected from their cubes to keep things super secret, right? So no one can ever kind of torture them or learn from them. So they're always dead and they're just resurrected from their cubes when they're needed. So the campaign does have a system to handle and manage cubes. You get a resource called Silk, and that can be used to brought troops back from the dead. One thing I saw is right characters, right? How do we handle like a very specific character
Mhm.
dying? And I was thinking of like Oban, right? Like if they lose Yojimbo, it's like oof. That's at least in N4, right? He was their only really good source of smoke. If you lose Yojimbo in mission 1 and you don't have him for the entire rest of the campaign, you might really be in for a rough time. So there is a resource Silk used to buy back copies of dead units and then spend the points to unlock them again. But someone like a Shujai, who's always
Yeah,
resurrected the cube, you have to spend the Silk on them right up to get them to start.
that's fun. I like that a lot. So yeah, and where do you kind of see this app going? It looks like that there are tools to kind of put in your own resources, like you had mentioned. Is it possible uh, for people to create their own special rules and add those to this? And I assume that I saw some things that mentioned like events, so I imagine that there's probably some sort of random or semi-random happenstance between missions that maybe people could add to and things like that.
Yeah, well, right now I mean, I'm still vibe coding everything as they say. I mean, uh, it everybody has their own take on AI, and yeah, I don't need to get into it, but this was coded with AI and I 100% would not have been able to do it without AI. So, you know, at least there's that, and I like to think that
Hmm.
it was worth it despite, all the things that's going on in the world, but whatever.
Sure.
Uh but I'm developing it myself. The idea is I want to get it to a place where it just about is right now, where it is a complete package of what I envisioned, and then I will put it out there, and people can yell at me about what they think. Right? You know, I've the best way to get feedback on the internet is not to post something, but it's to post something wrong. Right? So I'm
Right.
sure once I release this and people start looking at it, then they're gonna say, actually, Gulams they can't become Moyib. You didn't read Downfall. So if people want to hit me with all that lore, I'd be I want to hear it. So
For
bring it
sure.
on. But I'm not sure I really want to let people tinker with it too much because uh, once you give people the keys to the castle, it can all start coming apart. And when you're doing your own narrative play, you just do whatever you want, right? You don't need me, you don't need the app. And I think that's what's so great about Infinity and the campaigns and stuff. I'm just trying to have this be a resource that's easy to use.
Sure. Yeah, and I was just curious like how feasible or difficult it would be to allow like someone to add their own, items to a given resource mod or event trigger or abilities or other things like that, if they had a vision for those sorts of things and wanted to utilize this tool to help track that, without it being like global changes, of course.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm planning on letting people tinker with the back end is like you can just like create a rule, assign it to a unit, and then the rule is in, the campaign. Maybe some very simple like when does this trigger or which phase of the game does this rules box appear.
Sure, that makes sense.
But what I
Yeah, because
do
I think
want
that.
to let people do is code their own like custom campaigns, like fully narrative and
Hmm.
let so I would love to I'm going to create some how to like actually make campaign videos once I think this is ready for release and I'll tell people like all right, so you want to make a mission, here's the fields you fill in. If you want to upload any assets, just host it anywhere and give it hyperlinks and then you can make these briefings that your players can read and people do that, you can export everything with a little download and then right now it would be like you email that to your player opens it in the app and now they have your whole campaign. But I would probably just say, hey, if you made a campaign, like send it to me, I'll push it live everywhere.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that.
It handles all this
Yeah.
branching narrative stuff, like if you won this mission you go to that, but if you lost this mission you go to this instead, so you could get pretty complicated with it if you wanted.
Yeah, and I think that that is one of the cool things about having such a mechanical framework is that, once you have this basis, you can kind of, scope creep to your heart's content,
Oh yeah, that's
in
exactly
terms
what
of
I've been doing is scope creep. This was initially just
it
for me
happens.
to help like calculate experience and promotions, and now it's like, all right, it's a competitive matchmaking and all this. You know, got to try and
Right.
just minimum viable product. Let's get it out the door first.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like, that's always a struggle, but yeah, this looks really cool. Man, I'd love to run through, because what's cool about this is that you can do just a handful of games and it feel like a complete experience from what it looks like, which I
Yeah.
really appreciate. Because I know we
So
mentioned towards the top that it's really easy for people to become disinterested or drop off. Like any sort of campaign thing, like any dungeon crawl I've ever played, I've never finished a whole a whole series or a whole campaign.
yeah, all the juice is for this system is in between those missions, and I did get to play a 2 game series today, which was very fun. I mean, I found a lot of bugs, like I kind of talked about in the pregame. The app was reading some values wrong, so I had
Hmm.
desperados who had dodge parentheses viral and mimetism parentheses explosive, and I was like, I don't know what those rules do, but they sure are funny. So
Right?
I had to fix all
I don't
that.
know.
But in our games today, we only got through 2 games, but in our second list, because of the casualties we took, we were both like, these are some weird lists. Like, this isn't a list I've ever come close to putting on the table. And I think that's how I knew like it's working, right? I want to give people a
Yeah.
different experience, make them think about things that they don't think about, and yeah, breathe some life into infinity. I guess it breathes more life into infinity because N5 is amazing.
It's really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I do feel like the game is generally in a very good spot. But yeah, and I think that that is one of the things that is so important to games like these is to have alternative modes of play for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, of course, because some people are just much more interested in having tools to tell their story instead of just, oh yeah, here's my headcanon for my guys while we play Outbreak or whatever. Like there's something more fulfilling for players that want that. It's also, I've found these in other systems to be good palate cleansers. Just like, you know what, I want to do something different. Like I don't just want to play Hardlock again or whatever the case may be. And one thing that you touched on earlier that I think kind of scratches the itch for me most is the progression aspect of the campaign mechanics. Like having progression and feeling like you're building towards something over the course of multiple games. I think that that's a lot of fun. So that's, a reason why I might want to do this. So, yeah, I think that it's important to have options because that just allows more people to interact with the game in a way that they find more fulfilling. And that's really awesome that you have this tool to help facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, my next steps are finish the app, which I'm nearly done with, but I am trying to make TTS maps for my custom campaign because
Mm.
I think that will be really good.
Mm.
Like I said, the first table is a 8 by 4 foot table. Player starts all the way on the left, and they have to get all the way on the right. And if that sounds like a good time, it is. But setting up those tables are a pain in the ass, right? I'm setting up like 30 different troopers, and it's a huge table. So I think getting a nice TTS map that someone can just load up, everything is deployed for you, so the DM doesn't really have to do any overload, any overhead, right? And
Mhm.
the player can just use my app to load up their list and run through it. So I'm trying to get all of the TTS maps, and I'll probably have a little bit of like a 3 to 5 minute briefing. Like, so you're the DM about to run a player through this, right? Like, here's the kind of things you need to know. Like, if the enemy's sneaking around, don't go kill them. Go investigate. Like play like a solid snake. Play like a solid snake enemy, right?
Mhm.
Get alerted. But if the enemy is steamrolling you, here are some things you do. Like for a lot of the missions, I players, but if they're doing too well, I'll just throw a troop out of hidden deployment and be like, "Sorry, you found a Spectre. Like he was there the whole time, I promise."
Right.
So, right, that's one little thing the DMs can use. Or the inverse is if the player is not doing well, you can play a little dumber, or maybe you just don't use any of your surprises. But these are the kind of dynamic choices you have to make as the DM in that mission.
Mhm.
So I'll hopefully make a couple little videos and just like, all right, you're going to do this mission as the DM. Here's what you want to be aware of. Here's how you want to play. When you're setting up your table, maybe here's a couple things to consider or to avoid. And I think that'll make it really easy for to run this campaign. That's all I want.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's probably a fair amount of overlap between uh, RPG players and Infinity players. So I'm sure that that will resonate with a fair number of players. But for someone who is new to that style of play, uh, any other words of advice you would give to them for someone who's trying to facilitate a game for other people as opposed to competing?
Well, for me, this kind of comes out of being a war core. I know I brought it up earlier, but I got into Infinity in 2016, played a couple games, and bounced off of it. And, that was the biggest regret of my life. But coming back to Infinity in 2020, right? Something clicked because I had people giving who were a lot more generous, and they spent the time teaching you. And I think when you do that with people, you unlock the world of infinity for them, and it's just such a wonderful thing. So you kind of need to slow it down and realize that you got to explain their choices to them on the table, right? Like you could shoot or you could dodge. Here's what would happen on a successful shot. Here's what would happen on a successful dodge. Here's where your odds are, right? I like to really show people their choices as they're moving around through the table, but it's also a balance of not backseating them either, right? You want
Sure.
them to feel like they're playing and making choices as well. So it's kind of like if you've played with anyone who is analysis paralysis, right? I just give people maybe 2 or 3 options off the top of my head, like, well, here's what you got to do. You got to go do this objective. So who's gonna do it, right? Like, how would you get there? Start working your way, visualizing success, and what troops maybe you should use that troop. Use the Spitfire to shoot my guy down. Don't just go run at the button. So I think you have to try to understand that there are so many choices to make in Infinity, and you just gotta try to make it simple, right? You shoot, you dodge.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, because I think that uh, I agree both, from trying to keep a story moving, which, for those of you who have run TTRPGs, you surely have felt that before, where you have players that are like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. And yeah, so having that nudge, I think, is really important.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah,
talking
well,
more about, like, keeping a narrative running, not to be crass, but I kind of view it like narrative in a porno where you're just there for, it's there because it needs to be and it gets us invested, but we're there for the gameplay, right? So I like to give people like, here are the overall, like, here's the bad guy, right? You give people a bad guy and they're invested, right? You give them a MacGuffin and they'll go get the MacGuffin. You can hype that up if you want. I think you can kind of scale that to your players, right? If they're that person who reads the lore, sorry, you're going to need to read the lore too to give them the experience that they
mhm.
want.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that, yeah, this is a really fun way to kind of engage players in a different way. And I also think that this could be kind of a fun tool, especially because I assume this is meant for kind of whatever points value. It doesn't need to be especially small or full size games. It's kind of modular that way.
Yeah, the verse mode campaign, the player versus player mode basically is, it starts at 150 and it can grow into a 200 and then into about a 300 point game each round. But,
Hmm.
depending on if everyone's dying or if no one's dying, that can kind of branch out quite a bit. So it starts at 150 and it caps at 400 on round 3. So
Gotcha.
I think this will go very, what my plan is to run at least an 8-person tournament now that I've done a couple test games with it. And instead of matching up people by their victory points, we're going to match them up by their army points. So in round 2, we might have some people
Mm,
who nobody died playing other people with really high point values, and then the people who got destroyed playing other people who got destroyed.
sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What I was kind of thinking of it, since it's modular that way, or plays at various points values, because like you said earlier, you're still just playing Infinity, is that it seems like kind of a fun way to hook in other friends that maybe they don't even really play miniatures games much, and they are more just kind of like role playing gamers. And it'd be kind of a fun way with a small game to, like, okay, well, you're role playing this small squad of guys, and here's a list, and here's how we play. And then you kind of have them be sort of attached to troops as they move along, and then that can be kind of a way to, help your friends get into Infinity through a different lens, which just seems kinda
Yeah,
interesting to me.
I haven't really thought about running it exactly like that, but I think that's a good idea. But you would be able, as someone who knows Infinity, you would be able to take on all of that mental load. List building is complicated, and just, pick
Right,
a list
right.
for them, right? You start the campaign with 5 Fusiliers on mission 1, and okay, all of your Fusiliers got out. What do they want to promote to? You could go with a bolt. A bolt's a good sniper, or this one could go to a Kamau, or go to that. And
Exactly. Yeah, and because you are also running the mission, you can make sure that there are certain tools that they have access to and things like that so that,
yeah,
they don't have to worry about a failure state by not having everything they're going to need and
so
know what to look for and all that jazz.
one thing I got to build into my custom campaign was something called the intel phase, and this is, it's the intelligence you get on the mission, right? Like when we play ITS mission, we know what mission we're going to play beforehand, right? And that informs
Mhm.
a lot of the pre-game choices we get to make. But what if you knew your classified card before the game? How would that affect your list building? Like what if you knew the enemy's faction for the game, right? So that's kind of the stuff I play with in the intel phase. You can learn about, what it is you're going to have to do, what the enemy has. Maybe if you have a lot of intel, you can learn that what hidden information the enemy has before the game even starts. So
Sure, yeah.
that's a fun way to kind of modify difficulty, and it was fun setting those intel values, right? So, for example, the lowest intel in the is Morats and US Ariadne with intel of 1. They basically don't know shit about the mission while they go in, whereas someone like NCA, who is like an intelligence agency, and
Mhm.
who else
Hmm.
is intel? Like assassins, right? They're going to go in with so much intelligence. They're going to know everybody's middle name, and that's going to be able to affect the choices that they make.
That's really fun. I like that a lot. Actually, that I think might be a good thing to go over before we start to wrap up. Is can you walk through? It doesn't need to be in intense detail, but can you walk through what a start to finish cycle is for the campaign? Like this is your first step, and this is what happens
Yeah,
leading up to the mission, and then after before you hit the next one.
yeah. So I'll walk you through the dig, is my second mission in the series. The first mission I do is really just a tiny one to get people familiar with the system, but the mission is just like kill the enemies, right? There's enemies, you kill them, but it's a good way to um, get people invested in the system before the stakes are raised, right? When you just have 4 Fusiliers, if they all die, the player doesn't feel that punished. But so mission 2 is really the first mission. Um, it's that big 8 by 4 foot table. Um, so the first thing you're going to do in a campaign is I'll just go through the app right now and talk you through it. But so
Perfect. Yeah.
pick custom campaign, and right now my Xenotech relic quest is the or mission set is there, and then you can choose whatever faction you want. Every faction, every sectoral is there. I don't have at moment of recording, I don't have Toha or the NA2 fully fleshed out, but they're in the app and they'll work. If you have any ideas for Toha rules, shout me out. But um, so you
For
pick a
sure.
faction and you can pick a sectoral as well, and it'll give you a little before you lock in and start your choice. It'll give you a little preview of the rules. So what faction do you guys wanna pick?
OSS.
OSS. All right.
I love OSS.
So we'll start with OSS. Um,
I'm walking along now too.
okay, so it's gonna throw you into the prelude mission, right?
Hmm.
Is that what you saw?
Yeah, so after picking and naming your task force, I have mission briefing. Greetings, Commander. Welcome to the command center.
Yeah. So this is that little demo mission that's super simple, and it's like,
Hmm.
all right, there's some bad guys kicking in doors, and they have a hostage. So you got to go get the hostage. Really simple. Then you return to the comm log, and you get your points, your funding, and now is when you build your list with the option in the top left to go view the briefing again. It's like, what mission are we doing? What's the goal? Okay, it's go get the mercenaries. So you go over to your army, you can recruit your units, and I basically rebuilt the entire Infinity Army app in here, uh, rules previewer and all. So if you click on like a Dakini name, it pops up the little title card. Nothing crazy, but
Okay, yeah.
so once you've built your forces and you make a legal list, like it requires a lieutenant, obviously. I tried to add on this thing deploy. So I will add a lieutenant and then
Hmm.
deploy. So once you've deployed, then you're in the action phase. And this is kind of just like play mode in Infinity Army, where it has all the charts at the top. It has can cycle through like stats, unconscious, conscious, um, and click on the profiles to view their stats, whatever. Like I said, I'm really not trying to change the gameplay, so there's not much here. This is kind of just a stand-in for play mode, right? Um, at the top, there's a gameplay reminders button that you click to see any of your faction's unique special rules. So the only rule I have coded in for OSS right now is net rods. Because net rods didn't really make sense, right? They're these little computers
Hmm.
that LF beams down from the sky to kind of help them with their computing power on the in the net, right? So it felt, and
Sure.
they're very disposable, right? I know Aleph doesn't like go back and clean those up and take them back. So counting them from mission to mission didn't make a lot of sense. So you could just buy a net rod for a command token,
Nice. Yeah, that's fun.
which is nice because that's a pretty order efficient conversion. But if you fail the combat jump, you don't get its order that turn. So you might not have your net rod's order on turn one.
I see.
So you play through the mission and then track all of your fates, unconscious, dead, whatever. And you'll notice if you put the lieutenant unconscious, it puts a big loss of lieutenant error, which I'm proud of. And you'll notice
Nice.
the meta chemistry icon at the top
Oh, look at that.
Hmm.
matches yours. So once you're done playing, you've done your 3 rounds, or you've decided to finish the mission. You click end mission and proceed to
Hmm.
the debriefing phase. So all of the states of the troopers are gonna go over from action to debrief, right? So everybody who is marked as unconscious, dead, those states are gonna be moved over to the debrief, so you don't have to like reassign them, right?
Hmm.
So everybody who is extracted alive will generate experience, and it looks like I haven't plugged in all of I haven't updated all of the experience stats for OSS yet. They're not fully developed, but you'll get experience for every unit generates experience. So, like robots, for the most part, are not really going to generate any experience because they're not learning. I think Aleph is going to be different because it is the one AI in the sphere, right? So she's
Right.
always learning through the combat experience. But
Yeah,
so
maybe there's
here,
some shared pool between remotes or something like that.
yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna go with. That's what I went with for Nomads as well. Like, come on, Billy definitely generate. Billy has a soul. So you come to your debriefing screen and you'll notice like primary, secondary, tertiary, and they'll all have a little. These are all of your objectives, right? And they'll have a little blurb about like what you're doing. So the primary for the first, rescue the hostages. So if you set that value positive, it'll say like, congratulations, rescued the scientist, and this is the lore. You'll get a lore blurb, like, right, they told you this, the mercs were interrogating him. Or if you put it to 0, the hostage was killed and commander's mad at you, right? So
Nice.
all
Yeah,
the
that's fun.
primary, secondary, and sometimes tertiary, right? This can have, your primary objective was this, but your secondary was that, and your tertiary was this. So all of those can have their own little, like, what happens if you are successful, what happens if you fail. And then if you, these primary secondaries also determine like if you have technically succeeded or failed on the mission, and then that handles your mission from there, right? So if you fail this mission, you might go to one mission A, but if you pass it, you can mark all
Gotcha.
your troopers fates, right, and then hit complete mission, and that will kick everybody back into the main screen, and we've kind of completed one cycle. And then you can go to another briefing if that pops up and do the intel phase. And the intel phase for the second one is a lot better because that's where it actually has very significant intelligence stuff. So that's where you got your big table, so you can find out all these secrets about the enemy, like if they have reinforcements or not, right? Or what units they have in hidden deployment, all those sorts of things. So it was very fun to kind of create like what could I tell a player about the mission before they go on it that they could use to their advantage. So in the dig, there's a gate that's closed, and if you spend some intelligence to reveal, you'll get the codes for that gate, and you can open and close it during the mission. Whereas if you don't do that before the mission, you'll find out on the table, right? It's still an option for you, but you won't be able to plan for it.
Sure. Yeah. Nice. I like that a lot.
So, and then the cycle continues, as many missions in the series as it needs to be. Like I said, this is my custom campaign, so all of these assets are just for me, but you can run this in like a non-specific mode where all it's doing is how many points were you awarded for this mission, and how many points did you know, how many victory points did you score, and it'll track them for you. But it's up to your DM to like, write the narrative on the table document.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, how do you determine, like, with this pre-written mission? Um, I see that you have the primary and secondary, but how do you know if you're getting tertiary or bonus points for things in this mission?
Since yeah, there is no tertiary objective in this one, that's why it's blank. I think the app will still
I
let
see.
you like put a value in there.
Yeah.
But bonus is like the built-in. Some factions will have a rule. Like my favorite one is
Mm,
assassins. Um, if if you're playing assassins, you have to kill the enemy's HVT. Like I just deploy an HVT at the start of the game. It's a designated target. If you kill it, you're gonna get one bonus point.
gotcha.
So the bonus is kind of for rules like that. Like maybe that's where Akari could do, X number of war crimes and get a victory point.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That seems like a pretty natural fit there. Yeah. Very cool.
We've talked a lot about the structure. There's a couple of really fun rules I wanna point out that I think are very thematic. Um,
Hmm.
who do we got? My favorite was the Guangxi getting recruited from Imperial service. That's a very fun
Right.
one. Um, Ariadne was an interesting case because they don't have cubes, right? So what
Oh,
happens
Right.
when the unknown ranger dies or someone really important dies? You can't use silk to bring them back. So Ariadne has a rule called, yeah, survival instinct. Basically, when a trooper would die, you can try a Phys -6 check to see if they somehow, bloodied, crawl their way off the battlefield with one leg missing. So they have a
Right.
small chance for some of their troops to come back, which, it might not be the
mhm.
one you want, but hopefully over the course of a campaign, you have a couple stragglers come crawling back, and that should offset you not being able to resurrect anyone except for Wallace, who you can bring back
Yeah.
because he is a cube.
Well,
Right.
you should make an exception for the Unknown Ranger because
I was thinking that he
Hmm.
technically he could be anybody, and it's rumored that when they go into operations, there's just like a guy gets assigned to the role or a volunteer steps up.
yeah. So I think he should not take the penalty to his check to survive, pass on a fizz check to come back.
There you go.
Who else is fun? Um, Cosmoflot's a very interesting one. Um,
Hmm.
because Cosmoflot recruits from so many different places, right? They really are like an Ariadne soup. So you can always purchase the like true Cosmoflot units, like your Rockhots and like your Zeniths and your Patchers, right? But
Hmm.
Hmm.
if you want to purchase TAC units or Caledonia units or whatever, each round you pick one ship to get a batch of recruits. So
Hmm.
if you pick TAC, that means this round you can purchase Cosmoflot units and you can purchase any of the TAC units, right? So you kind of have to say like, okay, well this mission looks like I'm really going to need some camouflage. Or, I mean, I guess the TAC stuff in Cosmo doesn't have a lot of camo, but or if you really need your Varangians this round, you pick Caledonia as your support ship this round. And then when you pick that ship, you get the matching sectoral rule as well. So it's you might be
I see.
you're heavily restricted. Like each round, you're only going to be able to buy a handful of units for Cosmo, but I think it creates a fun way to kind of build up round over round.
Yeah, that does seem really neat.
Assassins obviously have rules to kill the enemy's HVT, so if you're doing regular old ITS mission, your HVT becomes a designated target and they get a bonus for killing it. The one kind of fun thing though is you can't repeat kills with assassin units. So if your Fide kills the HVT, he can't kill it in round 2 or 3. You have to use a different.
Ah, okay. That's cool. That way, you don't have the perfect target every time.
Yeah, exactly. Nomads will get 1 experience for everyone they target. Just encourages you to hack people. It's fun.
Yeah.
And the last one I'll touch on is Next Wave, which were very complicated. The lore, there's not a ton of lore behind Next Wave yet, but they have some.
Sure.
The idea is it's all those guys who defected from Aleph, right, going over to Combined Army, and there's a theme of them kind of recruiting, right? They go out and they go find these humans and they recruit them. So in Next Wave, you don't really start with many troopers at all available, but you have all of your characters, and if you want recruits, you can send your characters out to go get those recruits. But what that means is you can't put them on the table.
Sure.
So if you want to bring like the Skyhound, for example, you start the campaign with 0 Skyhounds. If you want a Skyhound, Achilles has to sit out a match.
Gotcha.
So that means in round 1, you sit out Achilles and you have him, go get a Skyhound or whatever. Then on round 2, you can buy a Skyhound and maybe Achilles as well, right? But then if he dies, you're never recruiting another Skyhound or Juggernaut, right? Those are the 2 units that only Achilles can recruit.
I
So
see.
it is complicated, but you know what? If you're playing Next Wave, that's already a complicated army, right?
That's kind of
So
fair.
they have a kind of fun, like, your characters are your resource, right? Who are you sitting out to go get more, right?
Yeah, that's really fun. Yeah, and I can tell, I mean, there's definitely a lot of thought put into this, and this looks really interesting. I definitely want to spend more time messing around and looking at the different faction abilities and things like that. Like, yeah, this is really neat. Like, I've mentioned before that we're running an escalation league right now. We're just about to, I guess we'll be into round 2 when this airs. But yeah, that's been going really well. But I think that I've been meaning to, in addition to the escalation league that I run early in the year, I've been wanting to do a narrative event later in the year, and I think this might be the framework for that. Because like I've thought
Yeah,
about using mercs, because like merc kind of captures that kind of Mordheim feel, but it's much more complex. There's a lot more going on. It changes how the game works a fair bit,
yeah, yeah.
and I
I
kind of
like the
like that
Mercs
this.
rules. I looked
Mhm.
those over and I definitely was inspired by them because I do think they do some great things. But
Yeah.
I think the main barrier for people actually using the system is that you have to be such affinity aficionado to really get more out of the Merc system because it
Hmm.
does all add so much to the game, which I do appreciate. But I just think that I'm just trying to lower that barrier of entry. We'll see if this
Right.
does
Right.
it.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, like mercs is something I'd want to do with, you know, 3 to 5 closer friends who are playing and do like a small thing together. Whereas this, I feel like we could run like a league out of and have a bunch of people participate together and form a narrative as we go.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to do my first 3 round event in one day with this app in about a month or so. So
Nice.
we'll see how that goes, and I'm sure I'll be able to make it better after that. So
For sure. Well, I think with that, we're about ready to transition over to some final thoughts on this. But before we do, I did want to quickly say thank you to our patrons. We really appreciate all of your help in keeping the show going. Uh, Everything that you contribute goes right back into the show. It's not something we're like, taking out or paying ourselves with or anything like that. It helps cover your costs so that we don't really have to pay as much out of pocket, which is great. So thank you all very, very much for doing that. And for any of you who are interested, you can find us over on patreon.com/ministry. And we have some rewards to show our thanks for people who are willing to support that. And those include things like early access to episodes, final voting on polls, and some channels on the Discord that are patron exclusive, things like that. But even if that is not for you, you can join our Discord other than those couple channels. It is freely open and available, and we'd love to have you. That Discord is in the show notes, as always, and it's just a great place to chat infinity. So if you want to swing by and ask Toasty questions about the campaign, that'd be a great place to do it. Or if you want to talk to us about how we can better run a campaign, that'd be sweet. I'd love to have you there. Now, with that being said, Toasty, any last bits of wisdom or advice that you would give to someone who is looking to run a narrative and or campaign event? Anything that would be particularly helpful to them, you think?
I think you need to have a goal in mind as to where you're things, right? You need to have a loose structure in your head, and then it becomes a lot easier to improv in the moment, right? When something goes off rails, right? It's gonna happen where something's gonna
Mm-hmm.
happen that you didn't expect, or it doesn't work with the way you thought it was gonna work. So having a start and something close to an end point is really helpful in being able to push the games there and keep everybody having a good time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that aren't as much role players, that is definitely an important part of the process is to make sure that you're facilitating an experience as opposed to, just trying to beat the other person.
So come catch my campaign when I run it in person at the Carcosa Club in Brooklyn. Shout out to my local gaming store. Wargaming in New York City is a very different beast because we don't have a lot of open space, but Carcosa is still
Sure,
great.
yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Well, Toasty, thank you again for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really interested in diving into this further.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
been really
we'll see
good.
about running a campaign out of this later on.
Yeah, would love to help.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, on behalf of Metachemistry, this has been Devin.
Ian.
And Toasty, and that's the meta.